few simple technologies. We'll start with the simplest possible things, but let me give you some motivation on why we should do this. First of all, why technologies for the developing world, as I said before. First, the key things to remember are that the solar resources in the developing world is huge, right? There's a much more sunlight in the center part of around the equator than far away from the equator. And the nice thing is that, well, the bad thing I suppose is that there is little access to infrastructure. So a good example is cell phones, right? Cell phones basically piggyback landlines in majority of Africa and Asia. Right? This is an example of a technology that came in which completely changed the quality of life. Right? The farmers could now call and find out the prices without having to rely on a middleman. Right? So they could get better prices for the crops. And this is all and transferring money by the phone and things. Right? So it's an example where not having no access to infrastructure was not an impediment to the new technology. I think solar is similar to that, or at least some of these technologies. Biomass resources are, of course, fast depleting. Biomass refers to wood and things like that, which is what most of the world uses for cooking. And they also contribute to CO2, so something we want to address. Of course, the impact is giant, right? 1 out of 4 people on the planet have no access to electricity, so if we can come up with cheaper, simpler ways of creating electricity, we can impact 1 out of every 4 people on the planet, which is amazing. I mean, that would be an incredible feat. And at the end of the day, it has to be a market opportunity because you want to build sustainable technological solutions. You want to be able to make money, or someone needs to be able to make money so the whole thing is sustainable. So that's why the second half of the class is all about entrepreneurship and trying to understand the business case for it. But what's really important to really understand is that the business case is not completely divorced from the technical case. They are really intertwined, right? Because you might have a technical solution, it just doesn't work in human climates. So you need to innovate and make it work in human climates. But then you realize it's too expensive. So then you need to innovate and figure out how to make it cheaper. And that innovation may not be technical. It could be a use case scenario. A good example is Uber. Right? Uber is the largest taxi company in the world, but doesn't own any cars. So that's an example of an innovation which has to do with the use case or the model of how you make revenue. So there are lots and lots of different ways to innovate. And I'm not going to constrain you in any way. You can think about it as